Did you play video games as a child? Do you now? Perhaps your children play them. I have been known to throw a few recreational hours into video games between my broadcast sessions. When I'm not working one of the 4 jobs I move between to keep the station's bills paid, I'm a fan of RPGs and simulators mostly, although I'm willing to try most anything. Back when my brother Philip and I were children, we used to spend a lot of coin in the arcade down by the old wharf. There was an old Dukes of Hazzard pinball game we played occasionally, but we must have spent a fortune on the 3 cabinet games, Wizards of War, Polybius, and Sinister. I wasn't surprised when the news came out that Polybius had been some manner of government experiment. The U.S. government has made several forays into civilian experiments and monitoring, such as MKUltra, the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, and the Stargate program. I remember there was a game I played in secondary school called Silent Scope, where you were a sniper and would move through combat scenes and save hostages and neutralize terrorists. When you beat the game, you were rewarded with a screen that gave you a phone number for the FBI and a numeric code to enter so that you reached the right recruiter. All things considered, applying directly to the things we loved as children seems the best way to endear us to your cause. Considering games like Sad Satan, Kill Switch, or the Watson-Scott test, I am left to wonder, just what purpose are the children of the new generation being groomed for? Looking at the news, our fascination with death, and the rise in instances of premeditated violence without actionable cause, perhaps we should be concerned. These are dark times, and these stories come from very dark places. Hello listeners, my name is Johnas Armitage, and you're listening to Stories from Dark Places. I can't believe we're already at episode 3 of our little broadcast, and I cannot thank you enough for sharing this journey with us. We at WZHP Radio Innsmouth would like to thank you, the listener, for taking the time out of your day to give us a listen. I would also like to thank our Patreon and Ko-fi supporters for your generous donations, as they keep the station running and allow me to spend more time improving my craft. My hope is to expand our program further and provide you with more entertainment. That being said, I encourage you to reach out to us. If you love something about the broadcast, if you hated something about it, or if you just want to say hi, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, and on podcast providers all across the internet. If nothing else, you can email us directly at storiesfromdarkplaces@gmail.com. Now, for your listening pleasure, I bring you Chapter 3 of Spores by CreepiMonkeiBoi.
Patient 1 is currently in Stage 1 infection and quarantined in a biological containment suite. Patient 1 was exposed as a result of improper decontamination procedures following a sample collection in the greater Los Angeles area. Patient 1, formerly a corporal in the United States Army, was sequestered and discharged from service for observation following his infection due to negligent handling of sample trays in the entry tunnel to facility Delta 2. Patient 1 displayed symptoms of infection by 2 ETO sporocytes on his left arm. Sporocyte organism was measured to have begun rooting into the upper dermal layer after approximately 15 minutes. Prior to this time, contaminant can effectively be removed by thorough washing. Patient 1 was forcibly restrained from attempting to remove the ETO until after they had effectively implanted. Sporocytes grew into the dermal layer and underlying muscle and fat tissue at a rate of 2 centimeters per hour, while simultaneously extending out from the point of contact at a slightly slower rate. After 4 hours, the 2 spores had rooted into a depth of 1 inch and extended out into the dermis as black tendrils, approximately 0.5 millimeters in thickness. 1 tendril was removed at the skin, which resulted in patient 1 experiencing significant localized discomfort, likely a defensive response from the remaining root. The stalk regrew at a similar rate as before, returning to a comparable length as before. After approximately 6 hours, the second spore tendril began flattening and hollowing until it resembled a blade of grass. At this time, we were able to detect the tendril releasing 40 parts per cc of new spore cells every hour. This tendril was removed by surgical excision, removing the root as well as the head. Damage to patient 1's muscle and dermal tissue to effect this removal was moderate. By the time this procedure was complete, the first spore tendril had begun to flatten in preparation for seeding. Patient 1 was prepared for follow-up surgery to excise this spore. It was discovered during surgery that this spore root had grown deeper in response to our previous experimentation on it. The root had wrapped around the ulna 3 times and grown into the bone marrow. Patient 1's arm was removed, and he was declared free from infection after monitoring for 12 hours. Patient 2 was brought in stage 3, having been exposed to and inhaled airborne spores approximately 10 hours earlier. Patient 2 is a 44-year-old African-American male exposed from close proximity to infected family members. Patient 2 received rudimentary medical care at Reno Regional Hospital prior to the facility being declared a black zone. Patient 2 showed signs of dermal infection in 12 locations on his body and was determined to be substantially infected in his lungs and trachea by endoscopic examination. Patient 2 was measured to be outputting approximately 80 spores per cc of each exhaled breath. Patient 2 also displayed 4 tendrils that had grown from inside his lungs into his mouth and had begun to protrude. Patient 2 indicated extreme difficulty breathing and discomfort. Patient 2 was monitored for 4 hours and was found to have perished sometime during the time frame. Patient 2 was mistakenly believed to be alive due to the tendril roots continuing to contract Patient 2's lungs to further reproduction process. Patient 2 was disposed of by incineration.
Patient 3 is currently in stage 2 infection of both lungs and dermal variety. Patient 3 was exposed due to improper or inadequate decontamination procedures following surgery on Patient 1. Patient 3 was formerly an employee of this facility, but was sequestered and her employment terminated after she was found to be attempted to conceal symptoms of infection inside her assigned lab area. All exposed staff were placed into quarantine for observation. Patients 4 through 12 are all in stage 2 infection of the lung and dermal variety. All patients are formerly staff of this facility, exposed due to the actions of Patient 3.
Samples 13 and 14 are in stage 4 of infection and diseased at time of their discovery. Both samples exposed due to improper or inadequate decontamination procedures during sequestration of patients 4 through 12. Samples 13 and 14 were located inside the B4 men's restroom handicap stall and inside office B115. Both samples estimated to have been exposed approximately 20 hours before. Facility Delta 4, reclassified as Black Zone. Repeat. Facility Delta 4, reclassified as Black Zone. Leave it to the government to believe they have a handle on things, only for them to spiral out of control because of their need to study and weaponize everything. Inevitably lead us to the fall of civilization. Honestly, you'd think they'd show zombie movies at new employee orientations these days. At least one of the Romero ones. Those are the best. Anyway, that's all the time we have tonight. Thank you for visiting, and please do come by again soon. Good night, listeners. And please, the next time You feel like someone is watching you from the shadows. Remember, there's nothing to be afraid of. After all, some of the best things only happen in the dark.
Stories from Dark Places was recorded before an imaginary studio audience. All stories performed in this podcast have express written consent from the original author. Johnas Armitage, his studio manager, and the entire staff of WZHP Radio Innsmouth are fictitious characters, and it's probably for the best that you continue to believe that. Play video games with your children. If you connect to them while they grow up, you're less likely to grow apart.